All right, we are back. Better than ever. I think we got this figured out. Say what's up to the people, Kelly.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Hopefully, we're back on track.
Yeah, I was very quick to delete all the other clips out there because I was like, I have no clue what we're saying. We're enjoying some very nice fine
I think
beverages.
I lost you on audio there, Peter.
Yeah. Oh, you can't hear me? How about now? Smile and nod if you can hear me.
Yep, I appear to have lost you on audio.
Lost me on audio. Um,
Yeah, I can hear you coming in and out a little bit, but
but yeah, you're just kind of sounding a little glitchy there.
yeah, sometimes I've got you, sometimes I don't.
Well, hey, you know, um, that's a tricky way to kind of do a show. Yeah, it might be. I think at this point you might not need your headphones in, so maybe you take the headphones out and maybe that'll work. You think it might be a headphone problem? Hmm. All right, so I'm hoping we have the audio figured out. So I'm gonna jump right back into it. We're gonna pick up where we left off. So after the election that never seemed to end, Joe Biden has finally been named the 46th president of the United States. So right now, pull up a quick election map. It looks like Biden has 290 electoral votes, getting close to 300. I'm expecting Georgia may be called a little bit later this week, potentially. But, either way, Biden's probably going to get over 300 electoral votes, and the race is essentially over. And so the question I have is, what happens now? So the election, didn't exactly go how Democrats would have liked. Republicans will likely hold on to the Senate unless Georgia shocks the world twice, or really three times, by electing Ossoff and the other competitor there in the other Democratic Senate runoff race. So yeah, he's probably gonna have a Republican Senate, and we're gonna be in the middle of what's been described as potentially the deadliest winter in American history. The pandemic is already the worst mass casualty event in modern history, and it's only November, right? And so when Biden takes office in January, things could be looking a lot worse than they are now. Also, it's important to remember that the oldest Supreme Court justice on the bench is 82 and was appointed by Democrat Bill Clinton. And so theoretically, if Biden does get a chance to nominate a justice to the Supreme Court, he's probably only going to get one. I believe the age of the other oldest justice is 72. And so that's going to limit the Democrats by not having a whole lot of Senate seats to make massive change. And so if the Supreme Court, if they're looking at getting rid of gay marriage, abortion rights, and the Affordable Care Act, Democrats really aren't going to be able to do much to stop them because they won't have a majority or a supermajority in the Senate, and they probably won't be able to pack the courts to add justices to try to balance it out there. So you don't have to worry about any socialism or anything like that if you're conservative and worried. Also, the potential problem that Biden's looking at is that Democrats have come together to beat Trump, right? I mean, that's got the progressive wing and the moderate wing together, all so they can take Trump down. And now that Trump is gone, what happened next? What's going to happen next, right? If you thought the debate around healthcare was crazy then, just wait a few months to see what happens when Biden eventually does take office. So when it comes to solving some of the biggest problems of our day, how is President Biden going to be able to overcome them with a divided government? What do you think, Kelly?
So, Peter, I lost you there as you went to the map, but really talking about this transition team. What's next for Joe Biden? What's next for Democrats? Obviously, for Joe Biden, the first thing we're going to be looking at is the transition team. We're going to be looking at how he handles the shift from the Trump administration to his own administration. And obviously already running into roadblocks, the GSA refusing to recognize that he is the president-elect at this point. It's a very small roadblock, but it does show that this administration, the Trump administration, is not particularly interested in working with the Biden's incoming administration when it comes to the handover. So we could see some potential problems there. But the bigger thing, of course, is going to be the coronavirus pandemic. How does Biden handle this? That's obviously going to be the number one challenge when he comes into office. He's already, packing a team with people to get started and really try to put together a team that will allow him to tackle this head on, because that's what people elected him on. They elected him on a return to normalcy. They elected him on handling the coronavirus pandemic from the federal level, not from the state level like we've seen in the Trump administration. So I think that's the big things for the Biden administration. Now, when it comes to the Democratic Party, of course, we've got the centrists, moderates, progressives. Biden has always been a moderate, but he has moved left as the party has moved left. He is for, especially for a politician who has been in politics as long as he has, decades and decades, he's fairly progressive. So the big thing I think we're seeing right now is Chuck Schumer coming out and saying in Biden's first 100 days, he wants to see big moves. He wants to see the push for a $15 an hour minimum wage.
Which would be nice.
It'd be terrific if we, could really pass something like that. We do a lot to uplift a lot of people here in America. And then another thing that would be massive for Americans like you and I, $50,000 of student loan debt relief. That's something Chuck Schumer is saying that Biden can get done, even if he doesn't have the Senate's approval. So if Schumer is backing that, Schumer obviously is the Senate majority or minority leader, I should say. possibly the majority if the Democrats can win both of those Georgia runoffs. But obviously, he's the standard bearer for the party, one of those standard bearers. And so if he's okaying this deal, I think there's a good chance of that happening because I feel, he's speaking as a mouthpiece for the party in this case.
Absolutely. And I think as an entrepreneur myself, one of the things people don't, it's kind of interesting now, but in the in the history of the country, entrepreneurship is at an all-time low. And you have to realize there's so many people with student loan debt out there that it really kind of stops you from doing things like starting a business, or getting married, starting a family, and doing all these kind of things that really kind of stimulate the bedrock of the American economy. People don't have money to buy homes, people don't have money to get cars, and so that could be a huge benefit to the economy. I kind of had myself cracking up with it wasn't a funny thing, but I saw a report that 52% of millennials are now living at home because of the pandemic, and some older folks are like, "Oh, that's great that their parents could support them," and I'm like, that's not great. This is not where millennials want to be at economically. I mean, people look at millennials as like kind of young, super young generation, but I'm 30, and a lot of millennials are kind of getting to that mid 30 range. And the fact that they haven't been able to make some of these big kind of, life changing kind of purchases, or these big kind of things, has really been a drag on the U.S. economy. And so I'm hoping that he can kind of change that going forward. But we'll see, since the government is still going to be divided, and I'm hoping that Biden's going to take more of a scientific approach to the pandemic, but that's what it seems like so far. But it also seems like Democrats are really lined up to stop anything that he might do there.
I seem to have lost you on audio again, but I'll just kind of move into the second point of things we wanted to talk about.
Hold on a second.
We talked about what's next for Biden. So talk about what's next for Trump. Obviously, the first answer might be jail and prison. That's a very real possibility. Do I think it'll happen? No. Could it happen? Absolutely. I mean, the man, has racked up quite a bit of legal chaos, and being in the presidency has brought him a lot of notoriety that has shined a light on some places I think he would rather have stayed in the dark. Whether or not we'll actually see a former American president go to jail remains to be seen. Of course, Nixon got pardoned by Ford and, managed to escape any kind of consequences there from the legal system. But whether Trump will be able to do the same, especially for issues that are not presidential in nature, remains to be seen. If, jail, prison, what have you, is not in the future for the outgoing president, I think that we'll look to see him on Fox. We'll look to see him on OAN. We'll look to see whether he creates his own network and manages to turn a profit from that. And I think we're going to see him in 2024, regardless, whether he's a Fox News contributor, the head of the new Trump TV network, or in jail. I think he'll still be on that 2024 ballot. I don't think any of that is going to affect whether. I think if he's alive, he's running for 2024.
Probably. So Kelly, have you been able to? Are you hearing my mic getting a bit better? I changed my audio.
I can hear you right now.
Can you hear me right now? Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I kind of jumped ahead of me a little bit. Yeah. We're sorry. We're having some. We got everything figured out audio wise for the stream, but now Kelly's having a hard time hearing me. Did that sound okay to you, Kelly?
Yeah, I can hear you. You seem like you might be starting to go out a little bit, but I'll let you know one way or
Okay.
another.
But yeah, we can jump into the next topic here. And as Kelly mentioned, yeah, what's next for Trump? Now, there's a lot of change going on, obviously, throughout the country. And Trump supporters, they seem a little confused by it. They went to sleep on Monday night thinking that it would be a landslide victory. and they were very confident in where they were at going into the election.
Will you accept the result if Joe Biden wins?
No.
Under any circumstance?
No.
President Biden, that can't happen. I can't even think about that because he does not like America. He's a racist. Now that's a racist.
Now that's a racist, and that's the first time I've heard something like that. And so, really, as the numbers have come in, things have only gotten more and more confusing for Trump supporters from there.
Stop the count! Stop the count!
Yes, stop the count in Detroit, in Michigan, but in Arizona, they're saying,
stop the count! Stop!
Yeah, just not making a whole lot of sense there, right? And if there's one person who seemed really confused, it's Donald Trump himself.
Mail-in ballots are so one-sided, too. I know that it's supposed to be to the advantage of the Democrats, but in all cases, they're so one-sided.
Yeah, he forgets that he told all of his supporters to not send in mail-in ballots, which is why it's so one-sided. And now, supposedly, it's up to Jared Kushner to break the news that it's over. The plan now, as reported by the Associated Press, is to file lawsuits across the country to make it look like they're putting up a fight in the courts, but they know, and you and I both know, they won't win. The goal is to make the election look illegitimate and save Trump's ego. But there's a growing sense with those closest to Trump that this is all over. And so my question is, what happens next, right? It's been a wild, Trump was already firing members of the government. He fired his Secretary of Defense was fired today. So far, he's also fired 3 agency directors, and supposedly the FBI director is next. Also, it's been widely reported that Melania Trump could also be looking to make her exit from more than just the White House. She supposedly had an aide that she was working with her that said that once Trump is not the president anymore, she will not be Mrs. Trump anymore. But we'll see what happens there. There's also a number of pending criminal investigations in New York where they're just waiting until Trump isn't president to file charges. Now, on the bright side, Trump TV could be very popular. So much so that Fox News stock price actually dropped when Trump lost the election. But is this going to offset the damage to the Trump brand that used to be known for luxury, and now it's kind of known for crazy people with red hats? And so my question is, the end is near for Trump's presidency, but what's going to happen to Trump and Trumpism in the future? What do you think, Kelly?
Well, I appear to lost you again on audio, but really there's a couple more points, because of course I was talking about what's next for Trump after this. Where's the president going? There's a couple of things, we want to talk about that, they're setting up this large legal fund, fundraising for his legal funds to fund election lawsuits. But right now, 60% of that money is going to pay campaign debts. So it looks more like the fundraising for that is much larger focus on paying up their debts, getting 2020 out of the way, so to speak, financially, rather than trying to re-win the election. Another problem I think we really see here in the what's next for Trump is the lame duck period. Australia, for instance, they decide on a new government, and the next day they've got new people. Here in America, it's a little bit different. They've got months to go. It used to be longer, but still pretty long, altogether speaking. So we've seen some pretty bad lame duck periods in the past. James Buchanan, leading into the Civil War, basically just let southern states secede. Didn't really do anything to stop them, didn't do anything to keep them from arming up in that period. Didn't do a lot to protect federal forts. he left Lincoln in a bad position when Abraham Lincoln took over. And maybe if he'd done more, the Civil War would have been shorter. Hard to say. Hindsight is 2020. But a lot of people have said that for that instance, it wasn't malice; it was more incompetence on James Buchanan's part. I think what we're looking at here is something much more like Benjamin Harrison. Benjamin Harrison took the presidency in between two of Grover Cleveland's terms, and did everything he could to hold on to the presidency. That's why we have two Dakotas, for instance. We packed the Electoral College with all these Midwestern states to give Harrison's party the win. And it still didn't happen. But he loses, Cleveland's back, he's like, I'm back. He's doing his non-consecutive second term. He's the only one who've done it. And Harrison basically just goes, well, you know what? I'm going to make it as hard for him as I possibly can. Outright, just spends all the money the Treasury has, just spends everything the government has got, and then just leads the U.S. into a financial crisis. And it worked for him. He left Cleveland in a terrible position. A recession right before you're taking office. Harrison was trying to run out the clock. I think it started something like 6 days, with him left in office. And he was just like, well, it's the next guy's problem. But I think there is a worry that we see that here, that the Trump administration allows this to get worse, and Joe Biden, takes office facing this terrible coronavirus pandemic without a lot of help from the previous administration.
Absolutely, and we're entering like a new territory, because for the longest time, it seemed that Trump was focused on the virus in an effort to get try to get reelected. But now that that's not happening, who cares, right? And so that's the thing. Yeah. I'm also wondering, hopefully Biden should have a lot of experience, taking the country out of recession. I believe that the last couple of Republican presidents have left the U.S. in a recession when they left office.
First-hand experience for Biden and the Obama administration coming out of the Bush years.
Exactly, and there's a lot of fear mongering going on that I'm trying not to get into, because one of the agency directors that was fired apparently oversees something to do with the United States' nuclear operations. So, and I've heard a lot of talk from former Trump associates like Michael Cohen, who has said that he would not put it past Trump to start a war to stay in office. So,
yeah, hopefully it doesn't come to that. I think we're already in fairly dire straits as it is.
Yes.
So I think they're going to leave it at that, they're just going to essentially stick him with the coronavirus pandemic and the recession that appears to be in the offing.
Absolutely. And I'm curious about a 2024 run, because, in the next 4 years, Trump has kind of more or less admitted that he owes, $400 million. And so, like, the next couple of years for him, and, the Trump brand, I'm sure the Trump's making money while he's in office, especially a lot of those foreign dignitaries visiting his little hotel across the street from the White House there. But when he's not the president anymore, he's not going to, he's probably going to lose some support just from folks moving around in general. And so I'm wondering what his standing is actually going to look like by 2024.
Like I said, I think he runs no matter what. I think he is somebody who's going to see an advantage in it no matter what's going on. Any publicity is good publicity. I think he truly believes that. And I believe that even if he's in jail, he'll run. To me, the big question is not whether or not Trump runs in 2024. It's whether or not the Republicans choose to run someone against him. Do they say, this guy isn't our candidate, this guy isn't our nominee? Do they put Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, another of the 2020 presidential hopefuls, and then have that guy, run against Trump and Biden. Do we get kind of a replay of the 60s where, you had, George McGovern as this kind of spoiler candidate? I think that's the big question we see moving forward.
Absolutely. And I've kind of always thought with Trump, and I do think the Republican Party, it's interesting because, the Republican establishment seemed to hold a good grip on the party, but not to the same part that the Democratic establishment has. And what I mean by that is that, when Trump was first kind of coming up through the ranks, a lot of Republicans never took him seriously because, but I realized he was going to win this thing and he was going to dominate the party when he essentially got Megyn Kelly fired for criticizing him in the presidential debates and talking about how he's called women fat pigs, all those kind of things. And you thought, okay, she's asking a tough question, but he hit back on her and Fox News totally caved. And so right now the Republican Party is Trump's party. And it seems as things are changing, they're probably gonna, they're giving into QAnon conspiracy theories. A lot of the big party leaders are still not accepting the results of the election. And so the Republican side, it seems like, as when Obama was president, the Trump party, the kind of crazy wing of the party, took over things and made it hard for like your general establishment Republicans to get things done. And so it seems to me those folks like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and in some ways it's weird because they look like moderate establishment Republicans now. As crazy as they are, you kind of almost have to look at Ted Cruz as he's the moderate, and some of these QAnon supporters are the fringe of the party.
Which I think is the how they're running in 2024. I think that right now you look at what Ted Cruz is doing, you look at what Marco Rubio is doing, you look at what Lindsey Graham is doing. I think we're going to see all of these guys in the 2024 race. They're setting themselves up as these quasi-Trump supporters, but still moderate. And I think if they are elected, we get more of the same we saw under the Trump administration with perhaps less garden variety incompetence, secretaries just, blowing tens of thousands of government dollars on redecorating their office, probably less of that. But I think policy-wise, fairly similar to the Trump administration.
Yeah, pretty much. And, for Trump, for all his crazy and bluster there, I don't know what you think about this. Yeah, I don't want to, I know we're getting kind of long in this segment here, but I always thought that Trump, the antics, the tweets, all the crazy stuff was all just, it was by design. It pissed liberals off. And so, people would be distracted, wouldn't see, okay, Congress would pass something or Congress would do something, or there'd be some other kind of distraction with the administration. And all of a sudden Trump tweets, hey, we're moving the date of the November election. It always just seemed like this distraction campaign that worked pretty well. And so I thought a lot of that chaos was by design. And so I think once over the next couple of years, we're probably going to be unpacking a lot of things that the Trump administration has done from a policy perspective that none of us realized actually happened.
Yeah. Like you said, a lot to unpack there. How do we separate Trump the president from Trump the character? Because it's hard to tell where the man begins and the persona ends. I think also you saw a lot of fundamentally Republican ideas, and I think that the thing that really rubbed other Republicans wrong was like I said, the garden variety stuff, the garden variety corruption, the mistakes that shouldn't have been made, these massive gaffes, and playing to the base in ways that, maybe it turned out the base, but, really, really angered moderates and independents, like you were talking about, some areas where people, even though they voted straight ticket Republican, voted Joe Biden. And I think, in this scenario, we really saw the immovable object come up against the unstoppable force. And I guess the unstoppable force won this time. We saw a red wave, we saw a blue wave, and Joe Biden just put together a better coalition. And again, we'll have to see if he can hold that together.
Absolutely. Good point, Kelly. That brings us to our next topic of discussion. Okay, now I can hear myself. There we go. Sorry about that. I set up a whole new... I set up a bunch of new scenes and a bunch of new stuff, so we're all figured out together. Anyway, no matter who you voted for in the 2020 election, you were part of the most participated in election in modern American history, right? More than 160 million people voted in this election. 66.7% of eligible voters. Most people, the highest percentage of eligible voters since 1900. This comes after a record-breaking midterm election of 2018. So pull up the article here, in which 49% of American eligible voters voted in that election, the most since 1914. Which unfortunately a whole lot of people don't vote in midterms. And so the question I ask, and I think a lot of people are asking this morning, is how do Democrats keep fucking this up? How do they keep screwing up these elections, right? Just as Bill Maher asked on his show.
You are asking a question I've asked many, many times on this show, which is why in so much of this country is a D next to a politician's name so toxic? So toxic that no matter who they're running against. I mean, Roy Moore squeaked a victory out. A child molester, that much he lost by. Why is the D so toxic? And you talk about this too.
I've been shocked, Bill, when I go around the country, how working class Americans feel like the Democratic Party does not care about people like them, is not talking to them.
Yes, Roy Moore almost won, and as Bill Maher suggested, he's an alleged child molester. And unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. Here's Democrat Teresa Greenfield debating Joni Ernst in Iowa.
Very much. I might have missed it, but I don't think you answered my question. What's the break-even price for soybeans in Iowa? You grew up on a farm. You should know this.
I think you had asked about corn, and it depends on.
I asked her corn.
It depends on what the inputs are, but probably about $5.50.
Well, you're a couple dollars off, I think, here because it's 10:05. So, well, we'll move on to something else then.
And I don't think Ms. Greenfield answered either.
She actually did with the price of corn. We'd asked for the price of soybeans from you, Senator. You want to take another crack at it?
No, thank you.
Yeah, does not want to take another crack at that question. And Ernst actually won that election. And it doesn't stop there. Here's Democrat Jon Ossoff debating Republican David Perdue in Georgia.
You've continued to demean yourself throughout this campaign with your conduct. First, you were lengthening my nose in attack ads to remind everybody that I'm Jewish. Then when that didn't work, you started calling me some kind of Islamic terrorist. And then when that didn't work, you started calling me a Chinese communist. It's ridiculous. And you shouldn't do everything that your handlers in Washington tell you to, because you'll lose your soul along the way, Senator.
Ossoff won that debate by such a wide margin that David Perdue refused to debate him again. And still, Perdue is winning. Even though the race is heading towards a runoff, he actually beat David Ossoff in the election by just a couple votes. Also in Georgia, Democrat Ralph Warnock and Republican Kelly Loeffler are heading to a runoff. And this comes after Loeffler and Perdue came under a lot of fire for shit like this.
Both of Georgia's U.S. senators are under fire for allegedly trying to profit from the coronavirus pandemic.
Records show that Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue bought and sold stock shortly after a private Senate briefing on the virus.
It stinks to high heaven that those representing their constituents, hold on, Charlie, that people representing constituents have actually safeguarded their own money ahead of letting other people in their state know beyond some of their big donors.
Yes, while Loeffler and Perdue were telling their own constituents that everything was going to be okay, they were selling their stocks and taking care of themselves. And still, they're likely to be reelected. Kelly Loeffler owns the WNBA Atlanta Dream, and her players let her know exactly what they think of her. When they wore these shirts, asking voters to vote for her opponent, Warnock. And so, when it comes to all the main issues in America, we're talking gay rights, abortion rights, gun rights. Democrats actually have a majority of the country on their side. But they never seem to win, right? They might have won the presidency this year and the House and potentially the Senate. But why is this even a competition? After the chaos of the pandemic, the Trump presidency, the Supreme Court fight, Democrats actually lost seats in the House in 2020 and right now have only added one seat in the Senate. So, Kelly, my question to you is, why is the Democratic brand so toxic to millions of Americans?
So I appear to have lost you again, but really whether or not the Democrats lost this election is very much on your viewpoint. I believe that we're looking at, a very, very hard map for Democrats. There's been a lot of gerrymandering, a lot of state houses are now Republican, and has been hurting the Democrats. I think Joe Biden successfully going up against somebody as popular with their base as Donald Trump really says a lot. So I don't even know if I would agree that the Democrats lost, even though they are facing this very tough future with the Senate, because they have to win both of those Georgia races. Now, it looks like Loeffler will lose to the Democratic challenger in the runoff if things stay the same. He beat her ahead of time, but it went to a runoff. Whether Perdue will lose as well, I think, is more in question. Like you said, Loeffler and Perdue facing similar scandals, but Loeffler seems to be more tied with it. Seems like her challenger has more support. So really, I think what we have to look at is whether Ossoff can ride those coattails and whether he can keep putting up performances like he did in the debate to really distinguish himself from just any other candidate. Because I think that if he can't hit home, he won't win.
And the debate, definitely moved the needle for him. It helped him out quite a bit, but still, I mean, after that horrible performance where Perdue refused to debate him again, how is it this close? I mean, it seems like people are they refuse to vote for Democrats no matter what.
Well, I mean, incumbents are always hard to take down, especially if you're trying to take down a red legislator in a red state. Historic turnout there in Georgia. So I think all that Stacey Abrams is doing is working. I think that Democrats have a chance to win it. I don't know how much of a chance they have to pull off both races, but I do know that we're about to see millions of dollars dumped into Georgia. I know that Georgia is going to be a concern for Republicans from now on, because it wasn't that long ago that Virginia was a reliably Republican state, and now it is a reliably blue state. And North Carolina perhaps might have gone blue were it not for, a lot of Republican efforts to keep it from going that way, whether by hook or by crook. But I think Republicans have a lot to worry about from this election, and it's not just limited to Georgia.
I kind of thought going into this election, especially when you look at polling on what issues are, where Americans are at, or a lot of issues, I was in the same boat as you. I kind of thought, all right, Republicans, this is a dying brand, this is a dying party, especially when I look at how millennials vote, how younger people vote, and the demographic shift there. But after this election, I don't know. I mean, Donald Trump got 70 million votes. He actually got more votes than Obama did when he ran in 2008 and 2012. Now, obviously, a lot of that's due to, changing, there are more eligible voters now, but still,
right.
It seems like the Republican brand is looking better than it has in a long time.
I mean, I'm not even sure if that's true. I think we have a little bit of the cult of personality. I think we have a little bit of, with such high turnout, it's hard to say. But I wouldn't say that. I think Republicans are in the same position they were before, where, if they can take the Electoral College, they can keep winning this thing. But I think they're out of the running for the popular vote. I think we saw the strongest showing we're going to see for this Republican Party, for the one we're seeing right now in the Trump era, with Trump at the head of it. I think this is the strongest showing we're going to see. And if he's not at the head of it, or if he's in jail, or if he's facing perhaps more Republican opposition, it's going to be a lot harder in 2024. The Republicans are a traditional opposition party. They do it very, very well. They're much better at opposing than they are ruling. But I think that Republicans have a real concern here. Looking at Joe Biden's margin of victory, we're talking about these massive numbers of people we saw vote. Of course, we talk about that Joe Biden got even more than Obama got. We talk about that Trump got even more. But we're seeing a defeat on a percentage scale like we haven't seen in decades. Like I said, it's more than what we saw with Reagan. It's more than what we saw with Nixon. So this is just a massive scale from what we're seeing right now. I mean, of course, only you really could see something just crazy in percentage terms. And I think there's a few areas for both parties to be worried about. I think that, of course, we're already seeing people talk about Cubans shifting even harder than they have before away from the Democratic Party in favor of Trump. We also saw a lot of South Texas Latinos voting for Trump. Starr County, which hasn't elected a Republican since 1906. I don't even know if they've had anyone on the ballot since then, from what I heard a Republican operative saying earlier today. But, they picked up a much, much larger share of the vote than they normally do. And so I think the Democratic Party needs to be concerned about that, despite the fact that they see a huge growth with the Latino vote elsewhere. But for Republicans, the big concern here is the military vote. For a long time, it's been very, very, very secure for Republicans. They've been the party of defense, the military, expanding the military. And they saw, I believe, a 20-point drop in support over 4 years.
Seen that.
Which is wild. You know, you're looking at those provisional ballots, the overseas ballots from military members and their families. 20 points is a lot. I mean, even if you're still winning it, you'd rather win it by 27 points than you would by 7 points.
Absolutely. And one of the things I also saw that I thought was very interesting, and I kind of think it kind of speaks to the perhaps toxicity of the Democratic band, is that Trump actually increased his vote among Muslim Americans.
Yes.
From, I believe it was 14% in 2016 to 17% in 2020.
Yeah,
and it just blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we're looking at the unstoppable force, immovable object, and you know, Trump built his support with Muslim Americans. He built it in a lot of Latino areas. You know, even some Black communities did not turn out for the Democratic Party at the same level, comparatively speaking, to the share of the vote Trump got. So I think for somebody who picked up in all of these categories, you know, to lose is and lose by this margin, despite all of those gains, really historic for Biden. Again, what I said, put together a winning coalition because it is such a diverse coalition. We'll have to see whether or not he is able to successfully govern the country with that or not. But I think, you know, a lot of this is, you know, of course, comes down to, you know, we see different racial groups voting along those lines. But for me, I think the numbers I've seen on income are startling. I saw a statistic earlier today that Joe Biden won voters who make less than $50,000 a year. He won them by 15 points. He won people making under $100,000 a year by 13 points. And Trump won over $100,000 a year by 11 points. And I mean, that's a massive class disparity.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's definitely the question going forward is like, you know, can Biden kind of keep that coalition going together? But that kind of brings me to my next question here. And that is, can America come back together? So making prediction is always hard, especially when it comes to politics. Back when Biden was going to pick his VP, I thought it was definitely going to be Susan Rice. Republicans were actually already creating ads against her. But, you know, it was hard to believe Biden could have picked anyone else. And then my phone started going off like crazy. You know, and it was Kamala Harris. You know, Biden really, he could have picked anyone, right? Like I left my phone empty just in case I got the call. You know, you never know. Just like I do with the NFL draft every year. I always, you know, there's always a chance the New York Jets could call, and I want to be available. But I was very shocked when Biden picked Kamala Harris. And why didn't I think he'd pick her? Is because of moments like this.
To hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Yeah, that was a pretty hard hit. Kamala Harris destroyed Biden in that debate, and she actually got a big kind of boost from that debate. And yet, Biden still picked her after, you know, the big question coming out of there is Biden racist? And, you know, Obama did the same thing for Biden back in 2011.
Is he ready? You said, I think he can be ready, but right now I don't believe he is. The presidency is not something that lends itself to on-the-job training.
I think that I stand by the statement.
Yes, Biden was not able to say that Obama was ready, and then a couple months after that, he became his vice presidential candidate, and then vice president. And so I think it's important to look at that and see that, okay, it is possible, even in politics, to kind of put our differences aside and come together. And that's what we should all be doing as Americans. But it's important to realize what Biden is and what he isn't. He's a moderate. He probably doesn't know, how to log into Twitter. So we'll probably have a lot less chaos there. And is willing to set politics aside to get things done. But realistically, can he bring change to America? A lot of people did vote for Trump because of some of those racist dog whistles. But a majority of the folks, I'd like to think, all voted for Trump because of their own economic interests. They didn't care about racism or injustice. It was all about them. It's all about, how much money is my family making? How are my taxes looking? That was the main points. And it's hard to see if Biden's going to be able to, cut through that kind of mentality within the next 4 years. And so, Kelly, I'll pose this question to you. Hopefully you can still hear me. We'll find out here in a second. But will Biden be able to bring the country together in a meaningful way?
Again, I seem to have lost you a little bit, but of course that overarching question, where do we go from here? Can we move on from here? Comes down to a lot of things. It's not an easy question to answer. We're looking at a maybe, I think. We're looking at a party on the Republican side that, of course, not every supporter is in favor of white supremacists, but key figures in the party have, accepted that. We've seen Trump retweet white supremacists. We've seen a lot of, if you want to call them militias, sectarian groups, essentially, come together, and a lot of these are really, really fringe movements that have been moved to the front of the party in a lot of ways. And I think it's hard for Democrats to come in and deal with that, especially after the Obama administration, where we saw McConnell's opposition, for 8 years, just, sticking it out, refusing to nominate justices, even Senator Tom Cotton once refusing to nominate a dying judge because it would pain Obama. I mean, it's hard to come into that on the same footing. I think that people who are calling for reconciliation right now are not doing so in good faith. And I think that's the problem, is that you can't negotiate with bad faith actors and expect to get the same results you would elsewhere.
Exactly.
I think rather than a reconciliation, we're looking more at a reconstruction. I think that Biden is quite possibly the ablest person to take on this task. He has a little bit of the legislative know-how and get-it-doneness that LBJ had. He has the acceptance of progressive ideas like FDR had. So I think he could rise to this challenge. I think he could. Whether he will, whether Republicans will put country before party, rather than party before country, as we've seen in quite a few cases, I think to some extent indisputably remains to be seen.
And I think it's a question on both sides there. I mean, I'll be honest. I love politics. I do see myself as a moderate, but I've definitely been pushed more to the liberal side, just after the chaos of the Trump years. And I'll be honest. I was looking at the election, and I saw okay, half the country voted for Trump, half for Biden. I'm looking at these numbers. Okay, half is with Trump, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe Thanos was on to something. When he was talking about just snap my fingers and then we could just, but. It's definitely a problem, not just on the Republican side. On the Democrat side, I've seen AOC wants to put together a list of people who worked within the Trump administration to make sure that they never pull into work in politics again. Well, I certainly, I'm not a fan of a lot of those people. It's kind of hard to say, okay, let's move forward as a country while you're also making lists of people that you want to essentially eliminate from the public view.
I'm of two minds on that, because I think that AOC is a very smart campaigner. I think that, we were talking about earlier that Republicans wasted millions of dollars coming after her in what is, one of the bluest districts in the country. But I don't think that a bartender beats the third most powerful Democrat in the House of Representatives without a good campaign. I think she has a brilliant political mind. I think she really is putting out there ideas that appeal to people. And while she's still got that very progressive push to her, of course, it doesn't have quite the populist overtones that we've seen from a lot of other politicians right now. So I think people dismissing her ideas out of hand, might be a good idea to listen to her. Again, I'm using Reconstruction as the example. We didn't outlaw, people who had served in the Confederacy from becoming lawmakers, and of course, many of them did. Here in Texas, we have a big debate going on about statues with Confederate veterans, many of whom served in the Confederacy, some to small extent, some to large extent, but then later went on to be legislators. And it's hard to separate that. And so I think that dismissing out of hand the idea of blacklisting some, perhaps not all, of the Trump appointees, I don't know that it's a bad idea.
Yeah, it just makes it seem hard for things moving forward. And I did think one of the interesting things when you do look at the electoral map, I was shocked that, Americans voted for Biden. Biden is going to be our next president. When you actually look at the vote in a lot of states where there were moderates, like Martha McSally on the Republican side for Arizona, that actually distanced herself from Trump in the run-up to the election, she lost. And they sent Lindsey Graham back to Congress, and they sent Mitch McConnell back to Congress. And so it seemed like if you distance yourself from Trump, you paid the price. But if you were lockstep with him in a lot of these Republican states, you got rewarded for it. And so it makes it hard to seem that they're going to try to move to a more bipartisan government when the voters just rewarded them for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think you look at McSally with a larger than Pete Rose sized asterisk. I think, people were joking that she becomes this Jeopardy question of the only senator to lose twice without having ever been elected. I think she was a terrible candidate. I think that, the voters of Arizona rejected her, and they did not like her being reappointed to the second Senate seat after they had just rejected her. And I think that Mark Kelly was an incredible candidate. I mean, you have this guy he has the notoriety not only from having been an astronaut, which is just, as one person said on Twitter, just cool. Don't care who you are. Being an astronaut, it's cool.
It is pretty cool. But then you also have Susan Collins up there in Maine, who's heading back to the Senate as well. And, for any small business owner out there, if you got screwed out of the PPP money, it was because Susan Collins.
Yeah, I think she's a much better example of a moderate winning than McSally. Like, again, I think McSally, bad candidate up against a great candidate, which even Lindsey Graham beat his challenger, who, I think you had a great candidate there.
And they had I think they spent almost over $100 million on that campaign, and still he went back.
Well, again, to be fair, I mean, South Carolina has always been a red state, even during Obama's first run. Didn't turn blue like Virginia and North Carolina. And so I think, Jamie Harrison runs this amazing campaign. Had he not run such a great campaign, he wouldn't have gotten within striking distance of Lindsey Graham, who's never, not once ever, had to really defend his Senate seat. It's been such a Republican district that he's just been able to coast the entire time he's been in the Senate. And he's never really faced a Democrat challenger like that before. I mean, we saw him on Fox News, begging for money, which is shocking for someone with his standing within the party.
Yeah, that was not a good look on his part. He seemed very desperate.
He seemed shaken.
Very shaken. And, I also look at, Mitch McConnell, in Kentucky. And again, a guy who it's interesting to me because, money is not once it once was in politics. And I've read a lot about his big donors who have kind of left him because he's gone full on for the Trump agenda. And still, he didn't just beat Amy McGrath. He crushed Amy McGrath. And so I just kind of see it as this idea that, okay, now we're all going to come together, kumbaya, when a lot of these Republican senators are getting rewarded for what they've done. It kind of seems like they're going to be disincentivized to work with the Biden administration in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a definite risk of that, but I think with McGrath versus McConnell, you definitely see something like we did against the last challenge against Governor Abbott here in Texas, where you have a Democrat with a lot of buzz, a lot of popularity coming up against them, but maybe it wasn't the time, maybe the ground game wasn't there. Like you said, money isn't everything.
Nope.
Yeah, it can buy you a lot. Sometimes it can even buy you an election, but you got to have the right conditions for that to happen. And I don't think they were there. I think McGrath was always a huge long shot. I think she was a much bigger long shot than MJ Hagar versus Cornyn here in Texas. And I don't think that Hagar really had a shot of taking down Cornyn. But I think that if you follow, Beto O'Rourke's model for turning out the votes, kind of turning that Karl Rove Republican strategy on its head for Democrats of saying, okay, I'm not going to focus on winning over conservative independents. I'm going to focus on turning out base voters, people who aren't voting, who like what I'm saying. I think Beto O'Rourke had a much stronger showing. I think that's why we saw a much stronger showing for Democrats here in Texas. Of course, Texas went for President Trump by a wide margin, but we've never seen it as a battleground in recent years, And for Republicans, I think that's pretty scary. If they lose Texas, there's no real path to the presidency for them. So I think you look at these things of, I think a lot of Republicans may be disincentivized. They maybe say what we're doing is working. I think other Republicans, risk losing their elections because we don't see the same kind of fractures in the Republican Party that we do Democrats. Republicans really only voice an opinion about things when they've decided to quit politics.
Yeah, it's true. I know it's been very interesting to watch John Boehner in his post-political life on the board of a medical marijuana company. Definitely did not see that coming. But yeah, it's just, and
I did not have that on my bingo.
What was that?
Did not have that on my bingo card.
No, that was not part of the. Yeah, that was not expected coming from him. But hopefully that has chilled him out a little bit. And And yeah, you're right. Back in his time, you know, it was interesting that the Republican Party, and he's talked about that since he's gotten out of office, that the Republican Party kind of cannibalized himself. There was the Freedom Caucus. Yeah. There was the Tea Party kind of wing, and there was a bunch of, you know, kind of groups that just couldn't figure out, they couldn't get on the same page. And really, that's what helped Trump become president. The establishment couldn't get their act together early enough to stop him, which on the Democratic side, they might have kind of shut down the Bernie Sanders campaign just a little bit. Yeah. And got, you know, everyone to kind of jump in on Biden. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think you look at the standard bearers for the party, and you see the Republicans start off kind of in a middle ground there on moderates versus conservatives. You know, we're really looking at the hardliners of the party, really just kind of in a way moved right and, you know, gobbled up the Freedom Caucus, the Tea Party, rather than Democrats who seem to be trying to just wait out the progressive wave. So that's interesting to see, you know, what's going to happen with each party.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely the question going further. And another thing that complicates this question of, you know, can Biden bring everyone back together is Trump is going nowhere. Unless he goes to prison. I mean, I don't know if he can tweet from prison, but he is going to be there lock and step to try to throw dirt on anything that the Democrats try doing.
Yeah, I mean, he spent the Obama administration doing that, smearing them on Twitter, and that's what got him the presidency. I don't think we're going to see any change from that again, unless they take away his phone in prison. We talked through that of whether or not that's something we can actually see. I think if I'm the Democrats, I push for it. You know, hoping that he runs as the spoiler candidate. It wouldn't be the first time. You know, Eugene Debs got quite a lot of votes back in the day. It's not somebody who you would know now, and that's because he got votes while in prison on one of his presidential runs. But I think, you know, a lot of the stuff we need to treat this less as a traditional handover and more as a, you know, kind of the hostile takeover that I think we really are going to see, because I think you're right. I think we are going to see this opposition from McConnell. We are going to see this opposition from Trump once he becomes former president, inside or outside of bars. So I think, you know, we really need to look back to, you know, kind of like, you know, President Grant, you know, used martial law at one point to break the first version of the Klan after the Civil War. You know, he took bold, decisive action on that to shut down white supremacists who were threatening the future of the nation. And I think that if you look at all the problems we have today, and if you're not considering white supremacists to be part of them, I mean, I'm certainly not saying that everyone who votes Republican or everyone who likes Trump is racist or is a white supremacist. That's obviously not the case. But if you're watching this at home and you're thinking, hey, I voted for Trump, you have to acknowledge that you are in the company of quite a few white supremacists. There are, you know, Nazi groups, neo-Nazis, Klan members who openly came out in favor of him. You know, I certainly don't think it helped. He racked together a credible number of terrible endorsements that no one would want there towards the end from the Taliban and
Stand Back, Stand By didn't seem to help him very much either.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of that, you know, helped. You know, I don't think, you know, saying I'm supported by Nazis and the Taliban is really going to do you a lot of good, no matter who you are.
Nope. And I'm just waiting for him to, you know, see if he can track down Biden's birth certificate.
Yeah, out there in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, exactly.
See if it's got.
You just wonder what the next crazy conspiracy theory is gonna come up with. But all right, yeah, Kelly, that's some good points there, man. Thanks for sticking with me on this. It has been very interesting trying to get the whole show together. Like right now, I hear myself on a crazy echo, so it's been like weird for like the last hour to try to get it out. But like, I don't know, a lot of technical problems. But this is the first, Citizen Pete live interview, man. So I appreciate you hanging in there with me.
Maiden voyage, the inaugural visit.
The inaugural maiden voyage. Well, at least all the little bubbles like in the graphics there, that worked the whole time. So that's good. But Kelly Cash, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully I can have you on again. We'll figure out the technical issues a little bit better. But thanks again, man.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
All right. And thanks for all of you folks watching at home. We will catch y'all next time.